It's time for a PopCross Community Redraw that, realistically, I should have done ages ago. I mean, on this channel, I've been taking superheroes and turning them into dragons so long that a community redraw theme of turning subscriber superheroes and villains into dragons should have been a theme I did ages ago. So along with taking 5 of my favorite submissions and turning them into dragons, I'm also going to show off pretty much all the other awesome work that was submitted by subscribers, and tell some lore about these dragons adapted from the lore that was submitted for them, through the lens of Tayrun, the overseer of the beast world that all my dragon videos take place in, who it's very nice that I can finally show on screen when I talk about him, because of the Battle for the Beast World episodes where I finally drew him and a bunch of other characters. But anyway, really excited for this redraw, so let's jump right into it, shall we? Let's go. Hit like, if you want. Subscribe, if you feel like. But either way, enjoy the show. Being given the responsibility of watching over an entire world of people and creatures would be a daunting task under any circumstances. But I feel in my case it was made that much more difficult, seeing as how the being who oversaw this world before me had been doing everything he could for 100 years to create vicious monsters to kill all the humans I'm now charged with protecting. I've learned a lot in the past 3 months about what I can now do as the overseer of my world. Some of it from my own experiences, and some from an odd acquaintance who's been helping me. A fellow overseer named Astra, who spends most of her time trying to clean up the myriad of messes she's made across the multiverse in her limited time as an overseer. She's not always the most reliable person, but she has taught me a lot in her times coming to visit my world again, including the fact that my powers are much more limited than I assumed they'd be when I took on this role. I'd been anxious about whether or not I should completely eradicate some of the most dangerous species of dragons in this world to make it safer for humans and for the less violent beasts roaming these lands. I wasn't sure if it would be morally right for me to just end them all, even if many of them had been created with the specific malicious intent to kill. But it turns out wiping out full species was never actually an option for me anyhow. While I can somewhat manipulate the intentions of the creatures in the world I oversee, I have no ability to simply end full species. I can create harsh weather to push their migratory patterns, or create some diseases to dwindle their numbers, but even that feels cruel and in poor spirits. So I've been attempting a way to balance out the powers that overwhelm humanity. I've begun to forge my own creatures, ones that work almost exclusively to protect humanity from the vicious brutes of this world. The first I created was an ocean drake. I call the creature the sapphire gale tide, and made it specifically to ward off vicious seafaring beasts from shoreline villages and ships. I created the first of the species near the coast of Hawaii, but intend to make more and have them roaming the coasts of Japan, the mainland Americas, and the waters around the mining colony islands. The people of those isles may have a good handle on fending off the beasts that roam their lands, but even still, I'm sure they'll appreciate having a more helpful, pleasant species around. Of course, one thing I didn't anticipate was that when I created this creature, imbuing it with the intention to protect humanity, the people of Hawaii that first came across it didn't presume it to be helpful. When the beast first came across a fishing vessel that was being surrounded by a school of dire sharks, the humans saw the gale tide approaching and began hurling harpoons at it, presuming it to be another villainous sea beast that intended to devour them. I honestly felt silly for not anticipating this. The creature isn't unfriendly looking, but does have sharp teeth and a fairly large frame to ensure it can handle its own against monstrous creatures of the deep. I can't blame anyone for thinking that this new creature sprouting up in their region was maliciously natured. They've been threatened for so long that it's only natural for them to be defensive. I was, of course, somewhat distraught when I saw this first incident with my creature, but not too long after, I did see there was some positive headway being made in its perception from locals. A few weeks ago, I went back to where this creature was residing and saw it roaming the shores near a village, when a young girl, playing in the water, was swept out to sea by a strong tide. The sapphire gale tide slowly approached the girl, lifted her out of the water on its head, and carried her gently back to shore. The girl's parents rushed to her and cautiously watched the creature as it set down their daughter and swam back into the blue. They then went back to the others of their village and told the tale of the helpful creature that saved their daughter, and word, at least in this village, started to spread of my creature's kind nature. I consider this my first true victory as a dragon forger. Now, in my eagerness to tell of my first great success, I've failed to discuss the process by which I create these creatures. Admittedly, it's not an easy act to explain, as was first made evident to me when Astra attempted to tell me how it was done. You see, overseers have stored within our being a certain number of energies from across the multiverse that we can use to create life. Different energies control different aspects of a creature or person's being. Their strength, speed, supernatural abilities, appetite, skin, bones, all the way down to the speed that their hair grows. Properly constructing and linking all these intricate energies precisely so a new creature or being can come into existence without any serious defects is an incredibly time-consuming process. The fastest I've constructed a creature is a week, and according to Astra, the fact that I can successfully make a creature in a week this early in my time as an overseer is nearly unfathomable. She actually seemed angry how naturally good I was at it, as even she struggles with this, spending most of her time making fusions of other people's creatures by copying two species' energy layouts and merging them together. As implied by that statement, overseers can make copies of existing energies to help in our creation of creatures, with a single exception, that being a kind of energy that Astra claimed had different names depending on who you asked, but is essentially a soul energy. A soul energy cannot be copied. It's the thing possessed by every sentient being that makes them able to have a consciousness and have complex feelings and a unique personality. It's something that makes them uncontrollable by overseers. Every overseer, many millennia ago when the dimensions of the multiverse were created, were given a certain number of soul energies to make the first life on their worlds, and as the centuries went on, these energies became rarer and rarer, only naturally being made when a being is born of someone who already possesses a soul energy themselves. Most creatures of my world don't have this energy. They're created with a base level of desire to eat, drink, reproduce, and they live based on those instincts. When I took over from Eulytus, the cruel overseer who ran this world before me, I only inherited 4 soul energies, and I have no intention to use them anytime soon. I'm simply spending my time making creatures with the base desire to help people and stay alive. Which brings me to the second creature I've created. I may have been overly ambitious with what I attempted to do with this creature, but it seems to have paid off. See, I noticed that many villages and kingdoms that live near mountains often have to deal with avalanches and rock slides, often caused by creatures in the area. I wanted to make a dragon that could help protect people from these sorts of natural disasters, so my intent was to make a creature that could levitate rocks. This is an ability I'd seen from a relatively new ally of mine from another world, Alexis Jones, so I knew the ability was possible, and Astra was kind enough to make a copy of the energy that made it possible in Alexis and give it to me for this creature, even though she was skeptical that I'd be able to utilize it adequately. But not only was I able to use it, I actually managed to alter the energy on a structural level to enhance the power for a large-scale creature. And that is how the Jade Mountain Mover came into being. This dragon soars around the mountain ranges of Asia, keeping watch over villages in possible disaster zones. It has a keen ear for the quaking of Earth and will soar towards any possible mountain movement, ready to levitate away boulders and rocks headed for towns or travelers. When it lifts the rocks, it can then move them from the humans or fire them off in a different direction. It can also use the ability as a powerful attack if any creature near the mountains threatens a town itself. This was an incredibly exciting creature to make, but only made me more curious to see what else I could create. One of the questions I was most eager to have answered by Astra was whether or not ghosts are real. The people of the mining colonies have long maintained that the skeletal phantos that occasionally scourges their skies at night are undead creatures, and I'd always been skeptical about this as a possibility, but it turns out they may be correct. Astra claimed that undead creatures do exist in the multiverse. In some universes, overseers have created creatures specifically to seem undead, but technically are living with a very different life energy structure than normal beings. But it is possible for a creature or being to die and not truly pass on to whatever lies beyond the veil of life. There is a sort of glitch that can occur if a being dies and their soul energy isn't fully extinguished. It can remain in their body in a fragmented state, keeping part of their consciousness around to continue roaming the world. I've seen a sort of anomaly along this same line on the Isle of the Phasbian Kingdom, where some monstrous dragons, created by a cruel king and sorcerer, have managed to absorb the souls of those they've consumed, making the dragons possessed by souls that long to move on to the other side. That is something I fully intend to look more into, but in the meantime, I was also intrigued by the possibility of creating a creature that had the traits of an undead being. That was how I came to the decision to try my hand at forging the Plasmic Night Wraith. This is certainly a creature that people will likely see and fear upon first encounter, but I made it quite horrifying looking to serve a specific purpose. I needed a beast that would scare even the most monstrous creatures of the night. There are dragons created by my predecessor, such as the Scorched Nightmare and Fanged Jester, that are truly cruel and malicious beasts that torment and feed on any innocent that pass them by. The Plasmic Night Wraith has been forged with the specific intent to ward off these foul dragons from any area that people reside in. When this creature is at rest, it's completely intangible. In its neutral state, it can be seen, but not touched, though it can also make itself nearly invisible to prey as well. Its ability to be intangible or physical at will makes it an incredibly formidable beast, despite it not being particularly large by dragon standards. Of course, I may have overstepped slightly in my ambitions for this creature, as it does also have much more of a temper than I'd intended. When it sees humans being harmed or threatened, it becomes so enraged that it can actually become too violent to the assailing dragon or beast, becoming a threat to even those it's seeking to protect. For the structure of this creature, I'd copied some energies from the Brazilian Sky Pulse, and it seems more of that creature came into this one than intended. When this creature flies into a fury, it gains banshee-like abilities to let out deafening shrieks that can blast enemies away and be heard for miles around. While these creatures do work to protect people, their shrieks and appearance can be quite terrifying to any who see or hear them. I've spoken to villagers near where the first of these creatures resides and found that many claim their children have been having nightmares about the creature. That isn't an ideal outcome, but I suppose I should have suspected it as a possibility when I made a creature that looks like a skeletal blue demon. Overall, I'm still proud of the creature I achieved, but will ensure that in the future I make an effort to make my helpful creatures more appealing to regard. Though I may be speaking a bit too soon considering the next creature I forged. For my next creation, I actually had a lot of input from someone who has changed my life for the better at every turn of knowing her. It was her idea in the first place for me to be made the overseer of this world, and surely my life would have gone down a much darker path without her interference. Kayla and her mechanical friend Charlie come to visit me every few weeks, and they've both been astounded by the creatures I've been making. I'd love if they visited more often, as I've grown quite fond of Kayla, but they are doing good work with some of our other allies, traveling the multiverse, ensuring that other overseers are doing positive things for their worlds. But the time I do have with her is always quite pleasant, and her input for what I can make next is always appreciated. In her times coming to my world before I was the overseer, she's often had to fend off some particularly menacing slime dragons. She suggested I make a creature in the same vein that is helpful, not horrifying. That was when I began creating the Morphing draklops. The creature didn't turn out in appearance as transparent as the shambling slime drake, some of whom's energy I used in its creation, but its body certainly moves and shifts like an amorphous creature. It can drastically grow and shrink parts of its body and even alter its limbs into various shapes to create weapons for use against foes. This was not an easy ability to achieve. In fact, it was so difficult that I've been unable to replicate the process. I'm not entirely sure what I did, but I've been unable to make copies of this creature to make it a companion so I can ensure that it can reproduce. It seems this beast may have to remain one of a kind. Regardless, it is still an achievement I'm quite proud of. The creature's full body isn't made of the morphing goopy texture. It also has some armored plating that's connected to its skeleton that helps it maintain its resting form. The dragon having one eye instead of two was inadvertent, and I still have no idea how that ended up happening. It does give the creature a more menacing appearance than I'd intended, but at least it's not as terrifying as the Plasmic night wraith. With the unintentional complications aside, by the time this creature was complete, Kayla was still very impressed with it. We even got to take it for a ride around the Rocky Mountains, which was quite exhilarating, even if we came out of the journey with stained clothing from the mucus excreted by the creature's hide. When we completed the trek, Kayla even had the idea for me to create some creatures that we could transport over to the universe of a friend of ours, Heath Hurricane Reynolds. His world has long been overwhelmed by monsters far larger than the ones that scourge my world, and there is a chance my creations could help. Astra has been trying to help him out, seeing as how it's her fault in the first place that Heath's world was overrun, but she's had little success. Though apparently another of our mutual friends, Benny Sharp, has been building some giant mechanical armors to help in the fight against the kaiju of Heath's world. I was, of course, eager to lend a hand, but it could be some time before I'm adept enough at creature forging to make something to the scale of the creatures of his world. The larger the creature, the harder it is to successfully craft. Along with that, Kayla and I both accepted that currently my hands are full with the problems of my world. Though I am always eager to eventually help others, and if it makes me look better in Kayla's eyes, well, that's simply a happy coincidence. The final creature I made is possibly the most bizarre of the lot. See, my next goal was to make a creature that could combat some of the most vicious beasts on my world. Dragons like the monolithic Shin God or the Menace Ultra Beast. These are the creatures that threaten the safety of humanity most on my world. Though it should be said there are already some dragons that came into existence before my time that do already protect against these creatures. The mighty Ultra Beast, for instance, often fights these beasts, which has made me curious as to why this species exists. Presumably, Eulidas, the overseer before me, created them along with the most dangerous dragons of my world, but they act in direct contrast to his goal of wiping out all of the humans on my world. I could ask him. We chose not to kill him when we stripped him of the role of overseer and simply abandoned him on an island with enough natural resources to live out the remainder of his human years. Though, admittedly, after all he's done to me and my world, well, I've been working hard to not hold any lasting resentment for him, as it would only serve to harm me at this point. I don't think I could bring myself to approach him for answers. Perhaps someday. We'll see. But regardless, my goal still stood: create a creature to combat the worst of the worst creatures. So I went to Astra for further advice on how to handle such massive power scale in a creature, and along with her insights, she also gave some strange ideas about the appearance of this creature. She was insistent on how humorous it would be to make this incredibly powerful creature look like, as she put it, a cute little bugger. She was so eager to see this done that I agreed to follow her visual cues, giving the creature very large eyes, glowing purple limbs and gems, and making it fairly small scale. I used energies from the Orbital Marvel, Soaring Saigon, and even some from my own dragon ally, Violet, to help in crafting this creature. On Astra's suggestion, I gave it incredible vision and had its natural state to soar around the upper atmosphere, looking from above for threats, also ready to fend off any invaders from beyond the stars. This specific instruction struck me as odd. I hadn't even thought about the fact that the universe I oversee had other life-bearing worlds that I might need to help. When I asked Astra how many other worlds housing sentient life existed in this universe, she seemed to remember something and started laughing hysterically. Through her laughs, she mentioned something about a transforming robot war, but she said I wasn't ready to learn about that and told me to focus on this world for now. I was, of course, curious, but as I've said, I certainly do have my hands full as it is. Though, knowing there is more life out there, I made sure to make this creature ready to protect this world from whatever cosmic forces may come for us. I squeezed as much strength into this small package as possible, and the creature certainly hits hard. In its first days of life, it was able to seriously wound a monolithic shin dragon, though didn't kill it outright. See, with all the strength I put into this creature, it does still get exhausted quite quickly after a massive hit. Somewhat similar to my aforementioned ally, Heath. After one huge blow, this creature needs to rest for a while before being able to strike or battle again. I dubbed the creature the Celestial Strike Dragon, and while it is odd to behold and does have its limitations, it's certainly the most powerful creature I've made to date. But I am ever growing in my abilities as an overseer, and will strive to make more and more powerful creatures with the specific intent to protect people. Even with the little I've done thus far, it does seem my world is very slowly becoming a safer place for humanity. I have a long way to go and much to learn about how best to protect people of my world, along with the possible other worlds of my universe, but with the help of my friends, I feel I'm quickly making my way down the right path. Oh, this was such a fun community redraw to do. I really like this theme. I'm so glad I finally did it. And of course, it only turned out this well because of all the awesome stuff that was submitted that I had to pull from. Even if you weren't selected, thank you so much to everyone who submitted. It was so cool going through all your original superheroes. There was so much really awesome stuff sent in. And of course, specific thank you to the people that were selected that I ended up turning their characters into dragons. Sapphire Sharky, Nextskin Art, New Jork Art, Toon Comics, and Junk Gamer. This redraw was a blast, and I'll very likely do something like this again at some point. Maybe not your superheroes as dragons, maybe, I don't know, some other kind of thing that you submit turned into dragons or monsters. I think that definitely could be another fun future episode. But anyway, as always, now I have to announce the theme for August 2021, the next PopCross Community Redraw. And this time, it's going to be Goop. I want people to submit something goop or slime related. I'm gonna write some kind of story, likely very inspired by whatever lore people submit with their characters, and structure some kind of tale set in a goop world where everything's really goopy. You can create a creature or a humanoid, whatever you want. It just has to be goop or slime related. Please submit 2 poses of the character. They can be any poses you want, but preferably one dynamic pose and one sort of static pose so I can see the design. But besides that, go with whatever goop inspires you to make. Super excited to see all your submissions. I'll put the deadline on screen, and of course you can submit to Discord and Characters for Pop or to popcrossanimations@gmail.com, both of which are linked in the description of this video. By the way, if you're new here and want to understand more of the stuff that was being talked about in this video, check out some of the other Multiverse Tales episodes, like the Beast Chronicler or the Kaiju Slayer or Battle for the Beast World. But besides that, that's all for today. I'm Christian Pearson. This has been PopCross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed yourselves, and I will see you all in the next video on Monday. Goodbye.